All right, so here's our loop. Here's our main loop. Repeat until Snapcon ends. Please learn from each other and enjoy those sessions. Share your thoughts and projects. In particular, share them in the open mic, share your project session, but in general, share your projects you're working on the forum and during the conference. Meet new people. Don't just hang out in the cliques that you've already connected with. Please make an attempt to meet this wonderfully international group of participants, and please have a lot of fun. And I need to get off the stage because we have a wonderful keynote kicking us off. This has been our keynote for the last two SnapCons, and we're so delighted to have our team of Jens and Jadga. If you don't know, Jens and Jadga are the core team behind Snap. Jens was one of the early authors of BYOB, which became Snap, and Jadga joined the team. And they are delightful presenters, and they are delightful in terms of how many ideas they are bringing to this community. They have MOOCs. If you want to ask them about how to connect with their MOOCs, they've made some wonderful MOOCs. And I mean, I continue to get inspired by them every time that I hear them on stage. And I just was their host. I made sure I signed up for their workshop because I wanted to hear what they had to say. They were just a great workshop they just finished there. So the topic of this is what's new in Snap. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give a hand for Jens and Jadga. Woo! All right. The stage is yours.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, everybody. Wow. I think I can go home now. You've basically done everything. Hi, Jadga. Hi, everybody. So this session is about what's new in Snap, but there's also really a bigger theme to this conference. Let me actually share my screen and try to, oh, wait, I can't share my screen. Dan, can you make it so I can share my screen? Please. So this, now, thank you. So can you see it now? I guess you can, right? So welcome to Snapcon 2021. This Snapcon really is special in that this time we're trying something new. The last times it was more about Snap and the Snap community. And if you've looked at the program this year, it's a little bit different. This year, it's more about looking outside of our box into forks of Snap, other uses of Snap in other applications. And I'm really very excited to hear all the other keynotes about uses of Snap in Nets blocks for the Internet of Things, about Turtle Stitch, which is something that I've loved from the very beginning. And it's really about broadening the ideas that we can do with it. It's really about this whole world out there. And speaking of world, this is really just a project that Jadga and I made really literally a couple of hours before to kind of see what is. So actually, kind of one of the persons that started it all is Brian. Hi, Brian. So Brian is, I think, close to Dan, at least at this scale, in California now, in Berkeley. But this is where Jadga and I am. So there's actually kind of half the world in between us. And this already shows us really the most amazing thing about our community. If you just look at some of the core people involved in making Snap happen at the curriculum. And by the way, everybody that I'm mentioning here, I've just taken a bunch of names and tried to find out some locations. I'm missing way more people than should be in here. So here we've got Jadga and me in Germany. We've got Bernat in Catalonia, in Spain. Then there's Mary and Paul in Boston. There's Brian and Dan. Of course, we had to put Michael on Hawaii because he was there on vacation while important discussions and things took place. So this is really something where we're kind of almost getting into some international waters here. There have been contributions from, and we'll see spectacular contributions from Turgut in Cappadocia and Turkey, together with Darius in Poland. And we're going to see that. They're going to present it about using robots. There have been contributions about a new Hindi translation, and there have been wonderful discussions with Simon about Turtle Stitch. And then there's way more people involved. These are people that will also present at the Snapcon that are really inspirations. For example, you'll see in a minute something that is Wolfgang here, Wolfgang from Graz, Pocket Code, Turtle Stitch. We have this long-standing friendship, and so we've actually stolen some of the ideas from Pocket Code that we're working on now. And I hope we have inspired Pocket Code some of our ideas. So that's a really great relationship. There is, of course, John in Boston, who's responsible for many of the new things you'll find in Snap, and Kathy working on microblocks. And the biggest part of this conference is going to be all the forks. So we're going to start with this conference with some of the forks. You're going to see Andrea present Turtle Stitch. Last year, you saw Eckhart from Göttingen, and Eckhart has also worked on a new fork, a new extension of Snap, which is called SciSnap, for all kinds of machine learning and science. There's Joan in Catalonia with Snap for Arduino. There is Ken with his artificial intelligence version of Snap. And we're really trying to make it so that every one of these extensions or forks can keep working and really get something out of this. There's new forks like Paul's Micro World for elementary math. There's Dux and Eric with Beetle blocks, also aided by Bernard. Tiffany has been responsible for some of the forks. Dan is working on a new fork. Of course, Brian and Akash will hear about them. And this here, I think, is Ron working with the culturally situated design tools version of Snap. So this is really a lot of folks all over the world, and it's kind of fun to see everybody here. And we're really spanning the world with this. I'm sure I missed somebody. Oh yeah, the contributors. And if we draw this big enough, we've, as Brian used to say, we've taken over the world. No, we're not. It's really something that is very diverse and very, very inspiring for us. So as we've prepared, as Jadga and I have thought about kind of what this really is about, we were focusing on the idea of forks. And this has been a problem and inspiration, because a fork is a great thing. Somebody takes Snap and turns it into something entirely new, but it also seems like a missed opportunity. Wouldn't it be nice if we could follow all these forks? And we kind of get a little emotional by this, and maybe you all know, I'm pretty sure you also know this poem by Robert Frost about the road not taken, and it culminates in this. When I was in junior high school in upstate New York, this is what somebody kind of wrote into my yearbook, kind of about it, the two roads that diverged. And then kind of the poet says, but I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. And they always meant it like, oh, this is a praise of individualism. But of course it's not, because if you read the whole poem, is really a parody. It's a parody about Frost's friend, Thomas, who was always agonizing about, well, what could we have seen if we had taken the other road? And it seems that as the roads are forking, and as time goes by, these forks grow exponentially. And it's not about the road less traveled by, it's about all those roads that we couldn't take. And this is something that we're really thinking about a lot, like about missed opportunities. And I'm not going to, on this happy note, I'm going to yield to Jadga to kind of explore this some more.
Thanks, Jens. I will just try to share my screen. So we've tried to come up with a visualization of that, and as it turns out, Robert Frost kind of was a turtle geometrist as well, because what he describes is basically a tree structure. So we all know about trees, thanks to Logo and Cynthia and Brian. He describes a road, which is something like that. And as soon as I get to an intersection, I have to decide which path I want to take. So as Jens just described, if we keep on doing that, we're missing out on a lot of things. So here I prepared that little script that can draw a tree, and you can see that the roads that I can't take are, as Jens mentioned, exponentially growing, which is kind of sad, especially when we think of it from the tree example again. On some other branches, there might be more beautiful fruits or more beautiful flowers that we have. And of course, I wanted to program the flower. This is why I also took this example, because it's still my favorite beginner's example. So let's try to create the flowers on the other branches. I already prepared a block here that we can use for it. And as we all know, to draw a flower, we can just stamp petals on the stage. So I also prepared 3 petals here that we can use. And for example, we can just repeat the number of petals that we indicate in our block. We can just try it out here later. Let's prepare our script. And let's show the sprite so we can see whether it works. Awesome. Okay, so this is our super small, let's make it a little bigger. This is our super small petal. And to get to a flower that we want to reach on our road, we need to repeat something, the number of petals times. And what we need to repeat is we want to stamp the petal, and then we want to turn, again, turtle geometry. This is totally Robert Frost's thing. We need to turn 360 divided by the number of petals. Okay, let's just try this. Awesome, this works. Let's try it with a different number. This works as well. Okay, so now let's try our script again. And we see that we get different flowers on different branches. And if we take this one and we can see all the other flowers on all the other branches, this kind of sucks because we might miss out on really important things. And yes, as Jens mentioned, this is often what happens in software projects. You take one road and you add specific features, and then you can't go back to the other way anymore. And we want to accommodate more projects, and we want to focus on widening the participation of people, and we want to increase the variety of projects that we can have in Snap. And we even want to add new modes of collaboration, and we want to make it easier to customize Snap and to build extensions. And this is what Jens will show you now, what we've been working on the past month. It's not totally done yet, but you get a sneak preview on the new Snap 7 version with all those things included that I just mentioned.
Thank you, Jadga. So let me share my screen again. So isn't it nice that we can kind of visualize poems in Snap? That was something that we thought would be interesting. So let me switch to the next thing. This is now the path that we've taken, the road that we've taken. And I just want to kind of reflect a little bit of what's new since the last Snap conference. There's actually been a lot of news, some that you already know, some that you might have missed, like right after last year's SnapCon, Bernard implemented a way for us to browse senders and receivers of messages. And I don't miss Bernard's talk about where he got this idea from. Hint, it's small talk. We got a new way to export single custom block definitions, including their dependencies. We have this way where we can extract single blocks. I think Simon Walters was instrumental to demanding that. We've got the new ray length block that Bernard showed at Snapshot. You have new ways of finding blocks, and it just took us 13 years to add undelete for sprites. So all of this is new since the last version, but this isn't what the next version is going to be about, because all these things are already there now. What we're working on right now, and I'm showing this in this crooked fashion because it's not yet done. It's still very buggy, but you can still already play with it, is kind of the new version 7. We're not going to release it until it's done. That'll take a while, but I'd like to give you a heads up of what you can expect. And some of you, especially those who are working on special extensions, a little heads up of how you can kind of start programming in your extensions. So there are some big new things in the new version. And in fact, we are looking at the new version. And the first thing is scenes. We wanted to be able to use Snap so we can have more than one project inside Snap. We can have several stages in there, and we can switch between these scenes. So if you have more than one scenes right now in the dev version, kind of you see here's my world map project. Here was my starter screen. This kind of works like any presentation, like Keynote. So you can just add. You can make a new scene, and then you get a new scene, and you can program that. So that's new. You might have already seen that there's a new thing in there, which is a unified palette. And that has been the work of Michael Ball, who's working with Dan on a new middle school curriculum. And so I think the idea is that sometimes you want to make a version of Snap or a configuration where you don't show all these blocks, but just a few of them. And then it's easier if they're all in one palette. So we're currently a little undecided. The young folks like Bernard and Jadga, and of course Michael, love this unified palette more than the different palette. The old folks like me and Brian are a little more skeptic about it. So you'll have the way to switch between both of these, like there's a single palette or the multiple palettes as they were before. And aside from the unified palette, it's really also about hiding blocks. So already you can hide blocks for your project by right-clicking on them and hiding them, and then you can unhide them again. But that was only for built-in blocks. You couldn't do this for custom blocks. So now we're working on a way so you can also do this for custom blocks. The way this works right now is like if you edit it, you can, in the block editor, you can hide it in the palette. By default, it's shown in the palette. If I hide it in the palette and apply, you no longer see this right text block here. And the reason why we're working on this is, again, so you will be able to make projects, to make little extensions where you only show the blocks that you want the students to use, but you might have some blocks that you don't want them to use because they're not necessary. They might be, like the classic example is, they might be helper functions that you use to compute an intermediate result. So this block really isn't needed. It's not part of the user interface that you want to present in class. We're still working with this on this, which is why we didn't release it yet, but this is one of the features that we want you to be in control, basically, over the palette, over what you find in there. So the other thing that's going to be in there, once you're in control, you probably also want to make your own category. So you can do this and make a new block category. So you can say my category of blocks, and then you can choose a color. Let's choose this color, and then you get a new category of blocks here. And now if you make a new block, you can choose it in here, and you get, my keyboard kind of sucks. You get a new color, and you can you can make a new block here, and you can go to that palette again, and you can make many of these palettes, and it's not yet clear whether that's a great idea. So I can make another category, like another. So as you're doing these categories and you make blocks in them, and you export them into a library or by right-clicking and exporting them. If you import them into another project, you will also get those categories again. So this kind of is the idea that, for example, hardware makers like BirdBrain will be able to have categories for their blocks, but also Eckhart's SciSnap uses a lot of categories for astrophysics or things that don't fit in these traditional categories. A huge thing is about extensions. As you might have noticed, the way we did extensions right now was that we used the JavaScript function block. Now that JavaScript function block no longer is there by default. It is only there if you enable JavaScript functions, JavaScript extensions, then you'll see it. And the reason why we had to disable it is because it could be used for malicious programs, where a student turned in a program and it played a prank or a practical joke on somebody. And it actually, in one case, it was a little more than a practical joke. It kind of led you to another website that made you believe it was ours. So we had to disable that. It's still in there, and most of you have probably noticed it. So many of our own libraries need the JavaScript function block, but you need to go into edit mode and enable it before you can use these extensions. And that's more of a self-defense way. It's not really how we want things to be. So what we really want you to be able to do is to write your extensions without having to turn on JavaScript functions. So we've been thinking about a process, how you can do that. And what we've done is we've gone through all these libraries and looked at all these blocks that are in there. Wait, no, that I want to search for a block. And there are two hidden blocks that you'll find when you search for blocks. These are called primitive. And there's a reporter version and a command version, and they have a huge dropdown. And these are really the primitives that we offer that you can use for example, here you'll see all the map primitives that I used for the introductory example where I put pins on the world map. So basically, these are all the JavaScript functions that many people wrote for the libraries that we've been using so far, that we've been representing as a JavaScript block. So we've just made them primitive and we use them in the new libraries. For example, this scene here uses the text library of Brian, and sometimes it'll just bottom add to primitives. So what used to be a JavaScript function block now is a primitive. So you can use these primitives in your own libraries, or you just use the libraries. If you load any of the new libraries, they will just work again. You won't need to enable JavaScript anymore. So you will be able to just reload the libraries. They'll override the ones that you already have, and then your projects will just work again without forcing your users to go to edit mode first, because these primitives are safe. They can't harm anybody. But of course, what we also like to support is to make your own primitives. So we want you to be able to add your own functions to this dropdown and to publish that with us. So let me just switch over to, this is a new file you'll find in the source code, and this is for all of you who are working on extensions. Many of you have already discovered it. If you read through the little documentation on top of extensions, it'll tell you exactly what you can do to add your own functions that you need in your libraries, and then you can just call them using the function, the primitive function block. You can put your functions either directly into this file and issue a pull request, or there is a meta function, and this is really the primitive for you. There is a load primitive in here that lets you load an external JavaScript file by URL. Now, this will also require JavaScript extensions to be enabled, because otherwise you could just load anything. But we can allow certain URLs, or even better, we can include your JavaScript extension in our sources. And I would really encourage you to do either. Like, you can either host it yourself, or you just include your JavaScript file in the official Snap sources. We'll pull them and we'll distribute them. And that'll have another benefit. That'll have the benefit that if people use Snap offline without internet, they'll be able to use your extension. So this is really now the official way to extend Snap. It's still JavaScript. You can do everything. You can override things in Snap. You can change everything that you want in your JavaScript files. Just please don't do one thing. Don't implement eval, because that's specifically what we don't want to do. We don't want to have an extension that lets people evaluate arbitrary JavaScript. This is really kind of the biggest news. And with this, we're really trying to encourage you to give it a try, to try this new version. Some of you have already done so. We're pretty confident that this will allow many of, maybe even of the forks that we currently see, to just always stay on top of the Snap code base. And so people who have really helped with this is, and I want to thank Brian Broll for this. Brian Broll, Netsblocks, you're going to hear a lot about Netsblocks, a lot from Brian and Akash. Brian Broll has really pioneered this way of extending Netsblocks, and we've had some really great discussions with them, and we've just basically taken this idea from them. The idea to have a name primitive is also something that John Maloney has really championed, and basically all the programming environments that John has done, back from Squeak to GP microblocks. This is the way. So if you've been contributing libraries to microblocks, this will be very familiar to you. And already, and this has been the great, the really fun collaboration between Turgut and Darius that I've told you about. We have a way to interact with robots using web serial that they've played with. So you'll have a new library in here. That is the serial ports library. And with that, there's going to be a presentation, I think, from John, and I don't know what Turgut Darius is probably going to be involved to show how you can interface with Snap now to boards or to other devices, and even to microblocks running on those devices. So that's another big news. We're going to be able to talk to robots directly from Snap without having to use intermediate servers or any mediating software. And the last thing that we're working on, this has been something that was pioneered by Joan Glenn, and also by John Maloney again. John is just a source for so many things, is that we're experimenting with packaging Snap as a progressive web app. So if you use the development version of Snap, you'll find in your browser in Chrome, you'll find this in the URL button, this thing that says install Snap. And so if you install Snap, if you actually do that, you'll see this funky icon. That'll change. That'll be the proper icon. This is just something I made very quickly. If you install this, basically what happens, you get this app that looks like a real app, and it basically is a real app. It has all the possibilities. You'll find a proper icon somewhere. Wait, where? Here you'll find an icon in your apps. And the greatest thing that I can't demo now is if you're offline, like if you don't have internet and you open the costumes, for example, You don't need an internet connection to open the costumes or the libraries. The same dialogues that you use online will work again. So this is something we're very excited about. It's still not done, but we're working on this, and please try it. Okay, so wait, where was I? Oh, look at that. It turned into its own thing. Amazing. So, by the way, so you see these scenes for this presentation. So this has been really our fork. But as we've thought about what we're doing here about these forks, really what we're doing is something else. And we've looked for another poem that maybe is a little less pessimistic and maybe less of a parody. And since we don't really know much about poems, but there's this one poet that we know because Bernat and Mar named their son by him, Martí. So it's a poem by José Martí. And the second verse really is the one I don't know Spanish. So I'm just going to simulate it. Yo vengo de todas partes. I come from everywhere. Y hacia todas partes voy. And I'm going everywhere. Arte soy entre las artes. Art I am among the arts. En los montes, Monte-soy. And in the mountains, I am mountain. And I'm going to hand over to Jadga again for a visualization of that.
Before I start that, Brian and Michael and Bernat have been posting the link to the dev version in the chat. So if you want to try it out, please don't do it right now, but wait 10 more minutes to the break. You can hop to the dev version and try everything out. The links are in the chat. And my final thing to do is to create a visualization of that poem, because this is more the road that we've tried to take. So what we have is people with a lot of different interests. So some are more interested in artsy stuff. Let me make that full screen for a second. Some like computing and the hard math stuff, some like music. So yesterday I attended an awesome music workshop from Jens. I hope he can give it again at some point, because that was literally the best workshop I've ever went to. And some people prefer mountains or whatever, and we want to accommodate all of them. So maybe we can find a way that's to create and to do Snap that's more like the poem. We have a different approach, and depending on what we want to do, we can be that. So if Snap can be something for heavy computing for people who like that, but Snap can also be a tool to support people who prefer to be artists, or it can be the mountain for the mountaineers. So what I already said is that we want to have that we have people in the community that have a lot of different goals and a lot of different things that they want to do. And we want our community and Snap to be welcoming to teachers who want to try out their own extensions. They want to come up with new curricular ideas, for example, like Dan and Michael's middle school curriculum, and we want to support that. And we want to accommodate a huge variety of projects. So people who are more interested in robots should be able to build their own extensions and connect their robots to Snap. So we really want to widen the walls that Snap has. And to say it with the words of José Martí again, we want to be the arts among arts, and we want to be friends among friends, and we also want to be the mountains among mountains, or as Jens calls it, we want to have the new Monte-soy pedagogy. And with that, I would like to end the keynote and head over to your questions. I saw that some of you posted some questions in the chat, and we're now happy to take them. Thanks for your attention.
Let's give Jens and Jadga a hand. Thank you so much. Woo! Thanks. Wonderful, wonderful. All right, questions?
Okay, let
We were
me
kidding
ask you a
about
question.
Touché, Bernard.
Monte-soy-ry. Yeah.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Yes, okay. I came a little bit late, so I missed the thing about the scenes. Is that I just now tried out the new version and I couldn't find it. Where do I find the scenes?
It's in the development version. You can make a new scene. Wolfgang, I hope you came before I mentioned that we stole this idea from you.
No.
So I specifically, and it's not done yet. So we haven't
Okay.
done the, basically what works now is that you can add several projects and you can switch among scenes. We don't yet have a way, well, we do have a way, but not a good one to share data among scenes. That is something where we're still working on, which is really one of the main reasons why we're not releasing V7 yet.
So the
apart
way
from all the
we are,
bugs.
yeah, the way we are doing is just we share the global variables and the global lists, so they are the same. Yeah. Thank you.
There have been also more questions around scenes. Jens, maybe you can also answer them. Can you reuse a sprite in several scenes?
Right now, scenes are really just projects within a project, and there is no sharing. And that's actually something we need it's been a huge technological effort to make them happen. So we have some use cases in mind when we did this. One use case really was, imagine you have a summer camp of kids, or you have a class where kids work on their projects, or you have this wonderful project in Barcelona where kids come to a workshop and then they have this arcade machine and you want to put all these games, all these things and showcase them when the parents come or when, you know, the sponsor comes. So you want to have this one project that allows you to switch between projects without having to reload them or without having to open several tabs. And that was one thing. The other idea was, what if we think about units of sharing, where and units of ownership, like what's a sensible way in which kids can work on a part of a project and share that with somebody else. Now in computer science, we're usually, when we're talking about sharing, we're talking about, you know, consecutive lists, but we want to think on a wider level. So we think like, what if somebody made level 1 of a game and somebody else made level 2 of a game, which might have different characters or might have a whole different music or other backgrounds, maybe even other logic, stuff like that. So these are sort of the guiding principles. We also want to pursue different goals with that. Like we want scenes to be a unit that can easily be taken from one project and be put into another project. And one reason for that is that we've seen that kids actually try to use Snap to give presentations in school, for example, about something that they talk about, you know, some project, like here's some science thing or some historical thing. And so it's fine if the presentation or simulation is just a small one, but then when you want to show something else, you need to hide all the sprites and you need to disable all the events because you might want to use the same key for something else, and that makes it very hard to do. So it's easier to just make another project. And so what we've seen is people use Snap for just these single project presentations, but then they use PowerPoint if they've got more than one slide. And we want to enable kids to use Snap as PowerPoint. Yes, and
So
Catrobat has been the huge beacon in that. Absolutely.
Okay, so there was a question, will you at some point be able to also hide the categories that Snap already has, like the primitive categories?
All of that is, we're not yet sure. This is all, what I've shown you right now is, they always have these horrible metaphors in computing. The horrible metaphor here is bleeding edge. you've seen Bleeding Edge. It's full of bugs, and nothing is set in stone yet. These are basically a set of experiments yet, and the part that's the least done is the user interface. So we want to give you a lot of control over the palette, over what to show in the palette, and that includes categories. Probably you also want to hide categories. There might be other issues with that. It's gonna take us a lot of more experimentation with that, and also a lot of more interaction with you who are doing the extensions to find out exactly what helps you.
Jens, regarding scenes, in like your presentation with multiple scenes, is that actually increase the footprint of Snap project overall, or are they loaded dynamically as you use them?
No, nothing in Snap is loaded dynamically. That's the idea, is that a project has everything it needs inside. And that's another idea that Bernard is going to tell you about, where we got that from. So the idea is that really you have everything in that one file that you need. That's something that is very reassuring. Like if you had to go to an island and didn't have internet, what do you take along? Just take your project along. It has everything in there. Nothing is loaded dynamically. Memory footprint hasn't been such an issue since we changed the architecture to the new architecture. We made that specifically so we would support larger and bigger projects, and this is one part of it.
Okay, there was one more question, and Brian already answered it, but maybe you want to show it again. Is there a way to programmatically switch between scenes?
Yes, there is a new
and maybe
block.
Also which part are we still missing?
Oh my God. Okay, you're cruel. Okay.
I'm sorry.
You're cruel. Okay, so the way I made this, and bear in mind that, where'd it go? Oh, here it is. Okay. Bear in mind that I debugged this literally an hour before this conference. I pushed a new change because that part was broken. So yes, look at this. Here in these scenes, I have a sprite called Page Turner. And this is when I mouse over here, you see mouse enter, it kind of fades in and it fades out again if the mouse goes out. And if I click it, it'll switch to the next scene, because you have this new block here in the looks category. That's always there. Switch to scene. And you have these several options. So now I'm in the Monte-soy-ry scene. If I click on this, I'll switch to the other scene. Now, what we can't do, what Jadga is referring to, is I have these sprites in every scene. So it would be nice maybe to have some kind of frame where you do this in one spot. On the other hand, what I did is I literally just exported this one sprite and where is it? And imported it into every other sprite. That's a Page Turner sprite, and imported that into every scene, and then it just works. So there is a way to programmatically switch to another scene, but you won't be able to get out of that other scene unless it also uses that block. And that's part of the design that we're still very much contemplating over.
Okay, cool.
So the tension here really is in between expressive power. So, we could think of scenes in totally different ways. We could think about scenes, for example, as projects about projects. It'd be, for example, cool to have a stage inside a stage where we could, kind of have the tree structure. So the computer scientist in me kind of, takes great delight in such ideas. But then the other kind of tension is, how do we make it really useful? And really useful in a way, we could basically express many powerful ideas in Snap without having to use scenes. So I doubt whether there's any new powerful idea behind scenes that is computationally powerful. How can we make it really useful? And that's, I think, where there is a tension between modularity, like that these things don't break when we switch them. That's very much a design issue.
I was wondering about the progressive web apps, whether a user could create one for their own project so that they could distribute whatever they've created as something that looks like a native app to the world.
That's actually a great question. I haven't even thought about that. That is probably a problem because it relies on an individual URL, and it might not work with our URLs. It might actually use its own domain. I don't know. We'll have to.
We should be able to make it
into
work.
that. You think so?
Yeah, we can. It will take a little bit of work, but it's something that we can work on in the future.
I think it's a great idea, Ken.
Yeah, that's super cool. Kids would love that. I would love that.
I need to learn more about progressive web apps, though. I was stoked to find out that the word progressive doesn't mean what I thought it means. I thought it means like if something changes, the progressive web notices and changes also. It does. It literally means it's cool, like it's hip. It's, you know, doesn't mean anything real. It's just marketing.
Well, for a while, Apple wasn't supporting it. So does it work these days with?
Kinda. So I can install it on my iOS device, but when I turned off the internet, it didn't do the it didn't actually work. So basically, it gives you an appish feel, but not the real benefit of being able to work offline. But on Android, it does work.
Oh, it also works with Chrome and I think Firefox. If you have those installed.
No, I don't think Firefox works. I think Firefox only on Android, not.
Well, no, but it
no,
works
Firefox does progressive web apps. It's
nope.
no, yeah, it does.
Nope.
Yeah. I mean, that's W3C compliant to the maximum. Firefox.
No, look it up. They don't. For
some I've done
reason.
it in other projects with Chrome, and it works fine. As long as Chrome is installed, you could get progressive web apps on any machine that Chrome is installed on.
Yep. Firefox used to support it, and then they stopped it. So it's I think the main reason is we want to support people using Snap offline without and kind of have the same interface. I think that's the main benefit of that. So you can load all the media and all the libraries in the same way and not with an OS dialog or something like that. I think that's the real benefit of a progressive web app.
Okay, any more questions? Now is the time to ask. And also the rest of the next 3 days is time to ask. So
I have a quick question. This extensions is so exciting. We've been talking about it for a couple of years. How many of the current forks could now use it? Is there something preventing all the forks from coming and using it and now being just a library? So it's all part of the vanilla Snap that you could just join the library, or like BeetleBlocks and this and the Edgy and everyone Netsblocks, all the ones we've seen, Turtle Stitch. How many of them need something magical, or how many of them could work with the current extensions that you proposal?
I can speak for some of these.
Sure.
The ones I've been involved with. Snap for Arduino can totally become a Snap extension, and we are totally going to try to do that early-ish. BeetleBlocks is a different beast. The number of changes to the UI and kinds of objects and so on make it a little bit complicated. But we had a talk with Dukes and Eric a couple of weeks ago, and we may want to try someday to implement a 3D turtle kind of thing using Snap extensions. So it depends on how much of a modification it is, whether it's just an extension or a full UI modification.
So this is really just a
beginning. Can I talk?
Yeah.
I think that one thing about extensions is that even the ones that can't easily be transferred into this new extension framework, the authors of those forks might well be interested in doing the work to re-implement them that way, because the advantage is that your engine can then keep up with changes in Snap. So so extensions that were made long ago are based on, Snap 5.0 or something. And this way, with a big upfront effort, you avoid the going on forever effort of keep current with Snap itself.
All right, I'm looking at the clock and I'm seeing just about 10:15. Let's give once again a hand for Jens and Jadga for an amazing keynote. Thank you so much. Woo!
Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful. All right, looking ahead, we've got a 30-minute break. Please go get a meal, go stretch. Join us in Oye if you want to visit our just casual place to be social. And then Jens is going to be the lead on the Lightnings Talk session. So come on for the Lightnings Talk, and we'll see you in about 30 minutes. Thanks, everybody. Take care. Great job. Great talk.